Hello and welcome to The Spin Room, the show that cuts through the spin that politicians and others want you to believe and tackles the questions they don't want you to ask. I'm Elon Levy, and today on the show we'll be discussing the summit of the century or the dud of the decade, President Trump's summit with the dictator of North Korea. Then we'll look at Israel's new friends in Europe, asking whether Europe's shift to the right will help or harm the Jewish state. And then we'll look at the miserable situation in the Gaza Strip and ask what both sides really want to get out of the current crisis. On today's esteemed panel, we have Israeli right-wing former parliamentarian Michael Kleiner. Thank you, sir. Welcome to the show. Journalist Tammy Molad-Hayo, a regular on our show. We also have joining us from Washington, D.C., geopolitical strategist John Sitilides. Welcome all to the show. We are going to begin with our first topic, which is the summit we're expecting to happen very soon between President Trump and the dictator of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. That's taking place in Singapore. It's being billed as the summit of the century, but with expectations so high and very little expectation that the dictator of North Korea could deliver. Also thoughts that the whole summit could implode and explode in everyone's faces. So I want to ask you first, Trump said last week that he didn't have to prepare for the summit and that it was all about attitude. And I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe he's right, because this summit isn't about the fine details of nuclear disarmament. It's about sussing out whether Kim Jong-un is serious about disarmament in the first place. What do you think, Mr. Kleiner?
I agree. On one end, I agree. And it's like a blind date. At the first moment, you always know what direction it is going. But I don't take him seriously about not preparing. I'm sure that he was preparing a lot. I am sure that when he's flying this long flight, or flew this long flight, he was briefed on his way. And you may be sure that no other issue, no other stuff, no other material could concern him. He only dealt with the summit. He asked all his experts all the questions, every moment of it. But it's nice to say it.
Mr. Sitilides in D.C., are you confident that President Trump has been briefed properly? From everything we see from the White House, certain leaks, it appears the president doesn't have the longest attention span in the world to be tackling difficult and complicated briefs.
Well, I think one of the things that makes him a very disruptive president, and deliberately so, is he's rejected the stodgy, calcified ways of failing to achieve success with North Korea that we saw in the Clinton, Bush, and Obama administrations. So he's going to do things very differently. We have no idea if this is going to be successful or not. And it depends not only on President Trump, but also on Kim Jong-un. And also, I believe, to the degree that Xi Jinping is also communicating what is doable or what is acceptable on China's part, because they're also playing a very, very important role here behind the scenes. But I agree with the first panelist in that this is really more of a feeling out process. I don't think anybody really believes that there's going to be a solution to the nuclear weapons program that North Korea has undertaken for decades as a result of one summit. And even the president now has begun to concede this will likely be a 2- or 3-part series if they get off to a good start tomorrow.
Okay, so far we're talking, it's the very early stages. As you said, it's a blind date. We all know where President Trump perhaps would like that date to roll into. But tell me, I want to ask you, look, President Trump was presented a letter by Kim Jong-un's right-hand man in the White House. He said it was very interesting, very nice letter. 10 minutes later, he told reporters he hadn't actually read it yet. He's a bull rampaging in a very fissile China shop, isn't he?
Yeah, we just saw a very sad example of the way that Trump does not really prepare to anything at the G7. We saw how he acts around his so-called friends, or America's friends and allies. So I think in a way for Trump, he's still in a sort of a campaign. What's important is the photo op, and he's going to get a photo op. Well, for sure. So other than that, nothing matters.
I mean, to clarify, are you saying he's not realistically expecting any more strategic advantage than saying, look...
But for Trump, a photo op is an advantage. For him, that's all that matters.
Michael, I can see you shaking your head. We'll get on to you in a second.
Otherwise, you would have heard something, at least something, about the death camps in North Korea, about what's going on with the citizens there, about democracy, about all these things that Trump and America talks about so much regarding Israel, regarding the whole world. Instead, nothing. All we're hearing about was, to start with, well, insults, the little rocket man, and now with a very big letter,
Short and
which is
fat as well,
yeah, and then a very big letter, which apparently was very nice, even though nobody knows what's in it because he didn't bother to read it before commenting on it. And now, well, I have no idea what he really wants, except the fact to say that, well, look at me. I did it. I met with a guy, with the little rocket man. I made him sit at the table.
Michael, I can see you shaking your head here. What I want to ask is, look, President Trump is spinning this as a big achievement for his diplomacy, saying this is something my predecessors weren't able to do. But from where I'm sitting, it looks like an extraordinary concession to North Korea to treat a little rocket man, as he called him not so long ago, on equal terms.
First of all, he is much more sophisticated than people believe. And saying
you saw him at the G7 just a few days ago.
Saying I didn't read it means it's not so important what it's written. Important is what I will say in the meeting. Those who failed with Kim and made the concessions were the previous presidents, especially Obama, but also Bill Clinton, that made the concession because they came only with carrots. No sticks, and they
Doesn't democracy matter?
Having a
Human rights doesn't matter.
Didn't make sanctions and allowed Kim to outplay them. I must remind you that this unsophisticated Trump outplayed the best political system in the world, the Republican establishment.
That's
Hillary
true.
Clinton,
He did
Obama,
win against expectations.
So this is the hardest battle on the world to run a primaries and election campaign
it's not
in
an
America.
election for 4 years.
And if he would have been this dummy like my friend describes him, he wouldn't have
We'll get to you in just 1 second.
I believe that he knows what he is doing, and there will be no concessions until and no lifting of sanctions until there will be a real disarmament. It's very, very complicated, but also very, very simple. And he keeps it simplistic because he knows his goal, and there will be no carrots without sticks.
Tommy, I mean, very, very briefly, you know, this threat of fire and fury seems to have had some sort of effect.
What fire, what fury?
Well,
at
the
the end
threat
of the day,
thereof.
yeah, but at the end of the day, he's sitting with him in sort of making a big celebration out of it. Not a word about human rights, not a word about death
Indeed,
camps,
the elephant in the room.
not a word about democracy, nothing at all, except the fact that, look at me, I did it, I'm going to sit with Kim. Okay, so you're going to sit with him, and then what? And what are you going to get out of it?
I want to bring in, just at this point, we'll bring the conversation back to the studio, but I want to bring in our guest in Washington, D.C. first. Mr. Kleiner, I'd like to bring in our guest from Washington, D.C.
What did those Clintons and Obamas do for human rights by not speaking with Kim?
Well, on that point, we're going to turn to our guest in Washington, D.C. Mr. Sitilides, look, expectations are high ahead of the summit, and I imagine that if the summit doesn't go to plan, there'll be a lot of post-debate, post-event PR and unpacking here. If the summit falls through, there is no agreement, there is no joint communique. Who emerges out of it better? Who scored the bigger victory? Kim Jong-un for getting President Trump to come down and see him at eye level, or President Trump for getting Kim Jong-un to meet with him?
I think the one concession that Donald Trump has made is legitimating Kim Jong-un's rule as a North Korean nuclear power. That's a fact, and that's unavoidable, and it's the result of failed international policies over the last 20, 25 years towards North Korea. But what Kim Jong-un knows is if there's not the beginning of a process for denuclearization, the United States is absolutely determined to destroy North Korea's economy from within, perhaps force an organic revolt inside of North Korea against the Kim Jong-un regime, also prepared to restore nuclear weapons to South Korea and to work with Japan for a much more robust missile defense system to essentially destroy the North Korean regime if Kim Jong-un does
the
not
United
begin to
States
take the
keeping
steps
its options
necessary
open in case the
towards
summit collapses.
denuclearization.
We will carry on with this conversation immediately after the break. A big subject, the whole world's talking about it, and so are we. Fire and fury here in the Spin Room.
They looked headed for war.
We will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea.
They brought the world to the brink. Now, will it be peace? On June 12th, join I-24 News for special coverage of the historic moment as U.S. President Donald Trump meets North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Correspondents on the ground in Singapore as it happens, plus expert analysis from the Middle East and around the world.
Unflinching, opinionated. Weeknights, David Schuster and Shayna Estulin bring you analysis, interviews, and opinions that connect us to the Middle East and the world. Watch Crossroads weeknights starting at 6 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
Welcome back to the Spin Room. We're continuing our discussion now with the subject of President Trump's upcoming meeting with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Yes, it's the dotard meeting, the little rocket man. And here in the studio, we have two very special guests, Michael Kleiner, Tammy Mollad-Hayo, and John Sitilides joining us from Washington, D.C. And Michael, I'd like to start with you. Trump's economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, went on CNN and said that he defended Trump's, I have to say, quite petulant response to his G7 colleagues, defended his outburst against Justin Trudeau, saying that Kim must not see American weakness before this summit. Now, do you think that American weakness is more American strength is more undermined when America's foes see that it is divided with its allies than if they see a president basically bullying his allies?
I believe that it's not so significant. Kim is the last Bolshevik country on earth, maybe alongside with Cuba. He knows that at the end of the day, the Korean people who is suppressed in gulags, in starvation, wants to be part of South Korea, like East Germany, at the end of the day, fell into the unity with West Germany. He thinks how he can survive this process, not like Saddam Hussein, but like Hafez al-Assad or maybe Gorbachev, or some way he knows that he cannot stop the history. And I guess that if Trump finds a solution that he will make sure that he will believe he doesn't end up like Gaddafi, this is an opening to a better future for the North Koreans. If he would have refused, like everybody say, to meet Kim and give him this achievement, there would have been no prospect, no chance for the suffering North Korean people.
Okay, Tommy, I have to ask you, when the Kims, the Putins, the Xis of the world look at President Trump and they see him bickering with his allies, is that something that gives America respect, as President Trump is claiming, or is it something that weakens and undermines American resolve?
It weakens and undermines America. It weakens and undermines Trump. And, you know, in a way, he kind of lives up what someone from the British Parliament said before he was elected. He's an American buffoon. He really is. He lives up to every stereotype that everybody laughed at him about before. It's about the size. It's about the show off. It's about pouting. It's about Twitter. It's about public image. It's never about substance with him. Never. And you see it. You see it all the time. Even in areas regarding Israel and the Middle East. Talking about a peace plan, which we know is not written. He doesn't have one. All of us know that, because every time we're promised that he's going to come out with a peace plan, and then we understand that they're still working on it or starting to work on a new peace program.
Well, a complicated document.
Without understanding the situation and the region, and then Iran and clashing with the Europeans, and then with Canada. So, no, seriously, who does he regard as friends?
Okay, Tommy, we're going to have to wrap up. We're going to have to wrap up this part of the conversation. Pride. Tommy, you're convinced that President Trump is a buffoon, doesn't know what he's doing. Mr. Kleiner, you're convinced that really he has convinced that he knows what he's doing.
American pride and representing the interests of the American people, and stopping this phenomena where America is giving an umbrella of protection
we have to
over
wrap
Europe,
up this conversation now.
Europe is speaking
we have to wrap up this conversation now because we're going to move on to the next topic. I want to leave you both enough time to discuss the next topic. It's for the best of all of us. Moving on to the next topic now, Israel's new friends. In Europe, Austria's young Chancellor Sebastian Kurz is in Israel on a charm offensive, visiting the Western Wall this morning, a first for an EU leader, and saying he'll push for Europe to be more understanding of Israel's security needs. A heavy focus on anti-Semitism and Holocaust commemoration wouldn't be out of place given Austria's history, but this time Israel is boycotting the junior partner in Austria's coalition, the FPO, because it's a far-right outfit with Nazi roots. And that boycott was the elephant in the room in the presser between the two leaders who didn't mention it at all. Tammy, I want to ask you, Israel announced this boycott of the FPO, expecting that much of Europe would follow suit, like the last time the FPO was in government and was placed under EU sanctions. This time, nothing. Everyone's playing ball, and now Austria is going to inherit the presidency of the European Council. Is it time for Israel to drop this boycott?
Well, Israel has dropped the boycott, actually. We have to say the truth, because so many parliament members, Israeli MKs, went and met with people and ministers. So Israel is talking about a boycott, but truly there is no boycott. So
no. Well, let's just clarify, Tammy. On the ministerial level, government officials are having no meetings. But I mean, as you say, there are members of individual members of Knesset who are meeting with them.
It's diplomacy. And ministers also. We all know how it works. We have to decide either neo-Nazis and Nazi-rooted. Nazi-rooted. Fine. And they do have Nazi roots.
Mr. Kleiner, you're going to have to substantiate that they do not have Nazi roots, because that is very well historically documented. Yes. You might say they've moved on, but the fact they have Nazi roots is beyond doubt. And I encourage you all to tune into the rundown tonight. We have a special investigation on the subject. But John, I want to go to you now. Austria's Kurz saying. Okay, they definitely did have Nazi roots. We'll be very happy to provide references later. But John, I want to ask you now, Sebastian Kurz now saying he wants Europe to be more understanding of Israel's own security needs in the region. Geopolitically, do you see an opening for the European Union to begin shifting its stance and being more understanding of the difficult predicament that Israel finds itself in?
This is an undertaking that Europe should have taken years, if not decades ago. It's a very unfortunate development in international affairs that the European powers, by and large, have taken a very unsympathetic view of Israel's security situation, siding with organizations such as Hamas and overlooking what have been outright terrorist and sometimes barbarian activities against Israeli citizens. And really, the Israelis being forced into a situation where, working with Egypt and, ironically now, with the Palestinian Authority, imposing an embargo or a blockade of sorts on Gaza because Hamas takes all of the resources that comes into this territory and uses it for armaments, for terrorist activities, and for nefarious activities that do nothing for the Palestinian people who are suffering because Hamas is being supported by Iran and indirectly by European powers who overlook Hamas's activities and want to continue doing business with Iran, regardless of the fact that Iran continues to pursue nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles.
Okay, John, Michael, I want to bring you into this discussion, given, the way you were defending the FPO earlier. Look, Israel is enjoying a growing relationship with the nationalist right in Europe, and I wonder whether it's because anti-immigration, check, attacks on the judiciary, check, even assaults on George Soros, which recently in Austria was considered beyond the pale, and now Netanyahu's doing it. No, now the Austrian FPO has also started its own attacks on George Soros. Check. I'm asking, is Israel growing closer to the European nationalist right? Because Israel essentially already has a nationalist populist government.
Well, first of all, today the real anti-Semitism, the effective anti-Semitism is anti-Semitism of the left. The right, most of it, not all of it, not some parties in Greece and Hungary, the opposition in Hungary, which are really anti-Semites. Most of the right-wing parties are very pro-Israeli. Vote with Israel in the European Parliament, deny terror, deny the PLO, recognize Israel. We're here at the time of the war in Gaza, Mr. Strache, the Deputy Chancellor. So Israel, by the way, you cannot play friends with Kurz, and this I agree with my colleague.
I'm afraid I have to cut you off because we're going right now to Christian Kurz. On this note, exactly, he's speaking at the AJC in Jerusalem.